Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I start or should I wait for people to kind of?
Tell us a good joke.
David Branston. That's my opponent, for those of you that don't. So it's good to be back here at Licking County Conservatives Central Ohio. Been to a couple of meetings here and talked with people. And it's still out in the hallway. That's a hard act to follow.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will try my best to keep your attention. So for those, I know a lot of people here in the room. For those that may not know me, my name's Matt Kunsman. I'm the conservative Republican candidate for Licking County Common Pleas Court judge. I'm currently a magistrate in the Licking County Common Pleas Court. I've been there since 2020, November of 2020. And so a lot of you, I know I had a question that was actually from Sarah about what is a magistrate. So just briefly, I'll let you know, it's not the same thing as a judge, but we have a lot of very similar functions. So I take evidence, I conduct hearings, I conduct trials, I administer witnesses, I rule on things that lawyers put in, evidence and all those kind of things, and motions. The biggest difference is a judge has to sign off on everything that I do. And so that's probably the biggest difference between a magistrate and a judge. And so they're, like I said, they're not the same thing. But, so a little bit about me. I grew up in a small town in Northwest Ohio. I was a 4-H kid. My mom was a secretary. My dad worked in a factory. It's actually the same factory I went to work in when I graduated high school, that very night, as a matter of fact. I worked third shift right out of high school at the same factory my dad worked at. So they taught me things like that, like hard work. My dad and his brothers were in the service. They taught me personal responsibility, a love for this country and the values that it was founded upon, respect for the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And I believe in all those things, and I've carried them through my career. I have my wife, Julie, and my our daughter, Kate. She's 15. And I've tried to pass that down to her as well. I think I've been pretty successful. She's not doing too bad. She's pretty good. So, so a little bit, I know, how many of you listened to the candidate forum on the radio last week? Did any of you hear? Anybody listen to it? So WCLT, in conjunction with the Reporting Project, and which is out of Denison University, it's part of their journalism program, and the Licking County Farm Bureau, had a candidate forum. So if anybody's interested, all of the candidates that are opposed or that have opponents in the election, it's on the WCLT website, WCLT.com, and you go to the podcast area, and there's a section for candidate forum on there. So I had a candidate forum with my opponent. So you may have heard on the radio, I talked a little bit on there about where I'm from. I talked about my faith and how it's important and how it applies to running for judge and the job that judges do. And I do think that it's important. I think it comes into play. And in combination with my faith and my conservative values, I think that those two things are one of the biggest things that provide a guiding force when you're a judge. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you have a set of principles and you follow those principles, no matter what's happening in the case, no matter what personally you feel and all those, you follow those principles in your life, and in this case, in the role of judge, and you're going to be a lot better off. You're going to be more consistent. You're going to administer justice equally and fairly if you follow that set of principles. And that was my point as far as faith and how that plays into it. I talked about how it used to be that a lot of criminals feared Licking County. It used to be that people didn't come to Licking County to commit crimes because they knew they were going to get hammered. They knew if they got caught, there were serious consequences. And that was another theme on the radio that I talked about was we need to get back to consequences. We need to get back to behavior that is punished instead of excuses made for behavior. And part of that also is considering the victims of crime in addition to or as well as the criminals that are in front of you when you're sentencing. And that's probably the biggest difference between my opponent and I, is that he's focused on the criminal, the impact a sentence is going to have on them, and what type of mitigation's involved and all that. And I think you should also be looking at the victim of the crime, what impact it had on them, their lives, their families, their business, their property. And one of the first things that comes out of that is you're going to have a balanced, fair decision. And that's what people expect when they talk about justice. And that's just something that I believe in. I think it's important for a judge to have. And I believe my opponent disagrees with me on that. He is a liberal Democrat. You won't see it anywhere on his webpage. You won't see it in any material that he's mailing out. You won't see it on any flyers. You're not going to hear him say it out loud. He was at Kamalapalooza over in Granville at the bike show. He was one of the featured speakers at Kamalapalooza. So as much as he tries to hide it, he is. And he subscribes to a lot of those same things, like limiting cash bail for people who are arrested and charged with crimes. And I don't know if you're aware, they're doing that over in Columbus. You know, they're actually giving police officers and sheriff's deputies a hard time. I talked to a woman whose husband was a sheriff's deputy, and she said, I just consider his salary hazard pay because they pick up criminals on the street and they get yelled at if they arrest them instead of giving them a summons. That's what the top down is happening over there. And that we don't want that in Franklin County. Again, the judges here and the prosecutors used to say, you're not in Franklin County anymore. You're in Licking County. And we have zero tolerance for that, and I think we need to bring that back. Amen. So my opponent's now desperate. He's trying to distract from things. He made a song with a banjo. If you looked at it, you'd think he's a conservative. He's got a dog and a tractor and a plaid shirt, and it talks about how he's a small town guy. You know, he almost looks like you would guess that he's a conservative, you know, if you looked at that. So he's making personal attacks based on my experience. He's saying that I'll basically be a rubber stamp. I'm not sure for who. I think he means the police. And then he says I'm following some sort of victim's agenda, when in reality, one of the things that judges have to follow in criminal sentencing is something called the purposes and principles of sentencing. And it's a set of guidelines that judges have to follow by the legislature. It's following the law. And one of the first lines in the principles and purposes of felony sentencing is to protect the community from that person committing future crimes. And I believe that necessarily implies looking at the impact that crime had on a victim. And so I don't know if that's a victim's agenda or some agenda that I'm following, then I'm guilty of that. Because I think that we need to consider those things as well. He doesn't want to talk about that. He doesn't want to talk about those things. There's a lot he doesn't want to talk about. He doesn't want to talk about how he had a big part in this venue, in this club, being taken away from the community. That he didn't want the jury to hear all the evidence in the case. He had a big part of that. He doesn't want you to talk about that. He doesn't want to talk about how he overrules zoning boards based on technicalities that affect people's property. He doesn't want you to hear about how one of those 4 people who were arrested for murder in Hanover Township was a stellar graduate of his drug court program. The one that's charged with aggravated murder now. Wow. So he doesn't want you to hear about Sean Grinnell. He's a drug dealer who was released 4 times. 2013, 2014, 2016, 2021. And he was released every single time on probation by Judge Bransfield. Released early from prison in the 3rd one. And in the 4th one, he got drug court. And what did they do? They wiped away all of his fines and costs. So who paid for that? We did. We all did. So he doesn't want you to hear about Robert Shook, which our chairman just put out a post about that. It's a tragic case. Who was a man who was at Walmart on 21st Street, 4 active suspensions. He borrows a friend's car, hops in, throws it in reverse without looking behind him, and runs over Carol Jones, who was a 70-year-old grandmother, right in front of her daughter. Wow. And what did he get for that? He even lied to the police. He had his wife sit in the driver's seat while he hopped in the back seat when they got there. He killed her. He killed her in the Walmart parking lot on 21st Street. And he got time served, 90 days. He did 90 days for murdering Carol Jones. So he was out on probation. But once again, all his fines and costs away. He doesn't want you to hear about Kalina Gillum, who after a tragic chemical abortion, her baby was born alive. And she failed to call 911. She texted her boyfriend, put the baby in a shoebox, You know what he did on that one too? Gave her probation. And he didn't even make her do all 3 years of probation. He let her out a year early and waived all of her fines and costs. And that one is particularly upsetting to me because those fines and costs included the cost of her out-of-state abortion activist attorneys who were appointed to her, the coastal experts who came in to testify on her behalf. It was more than $30,000 of court costs that he waived and let her out early. She didn't even complete all her community service hours. She didn't even pick up all the trash she had to along the road. I mean, I'm talking about consequences and what we need to bring back. And how does that tell people who commit crimes that there's a consequence for doing so? It sends the opposite message, I think.
Right.
He doesn't also want you to hear about the teacher who molested 2 of their students, abused the trust. So he molested 2 students on 2 different occasions, despite the prosecutor showing up. Now, that teacher went to prison, I'll give him that, for about 5 months. Was pulled back out, and the judge wanted to release him. And the prosecutor and all the victims showed up and said, we don't agree with this. We don't want him out. And he got out anyway. Out on probation again. Prosecutors have heard him refer to child pornography as a victimless crime.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So just because it's pictures on somebody's computer or videos. He routinely allows criminals the last word at sentencing. So only in his courtroom at a sentencing hearing, does the prosecutor talk about all the factors that went into the crime and what they think the suggested sentence should be. And then the defendant and the criminal, the person who's being sentenced talks. And then usually the victim and the prosecutor have a chance to either rebut or maybe add additional information after they've talked. He doesn't allow them to do that. The defendant and the criminal have the last word before sentencing. And he's the only courtroom that does that. He's the only courtroom in Licking County that does that. Bond officers who witness people on pretrial bond committing violations, they're not allowed to arrest them on the spot. They have to put in paperwork and ask for a hearing the following Monday if it's a weekend. So, and then the last one, the one that he doesn't want to talk about is, and this one just particularly gets me, there was a drug dealer from Washington State who was convicted after a jury trial. And as he was leaving the courtroom, Judge Bransell asked him, are you going to appeal this case? And he says, well, heck yeah. So he's in cuffs, being let out. And he said, are you looking to have a bond set while you appeal it? And that means, do you want to get out while your appeal is pending? I mean, heck yeah. He said, yes, absolutely. He set a drug dealer from Washington State a $4,000 appeal bond. He posted the whole thing, and what do you think happened? He showed right up, right? To shoot a report to prison. He was gone. We've never seen him again. He was gone. So wow. I am a conservative. I think government exists to serve the people. I think the judge has that role as well, to protect the community from crime and to serve the people and to follow the law. I believe in the Constitution, the principles this country is founded upon. My parents passed that down to me. Federalist Paper number 78 says, judges shall not wield the sword or the purse. And that means we follow the law. We don't make the law. We don't rewrite it from the bench based on what we think it should be. We don't change it because we disagree with some policy the legislature has. The law is passed down, and if someone is rightfully convicted, we sentence them based on that law. And that's what I think should be happening, and that's what I think is not happening in the court, and that's why I'm running. So our county safety and sticking to these conservative principles are my priorities in this election. And one thing that I need to mention is I have the support of countless elected officials here in Licking County. And I mentioned this on the radio as well. One thing I have that my opponent does not have is I have the support of law enforcement. I've got endorsement from the Licking County prosecutor and the Licking County Fraternal Order of Police. And I have talked to a lot of people, door to door, festivals and fairs all around this county, but I've also talked to law enforcement, and they want to change. And nothing says that a change is needed like when law enforcement does not endorse the sitting judge. that's in there. So that's why they put their support behind me, behind Matt Kunsman for judge. And I'm very proud of that, and I'm glad I have their trust, and I'm not going to let them down. And with your help, we're in the end game now. We got 19 days. And I'm going to ask you, for some of you, I'm just meeting you tonight. For some of you, I've known you for a while. If you could please, even those who've already voted, tell your neighbors, tell your friends. Importantly, this is technically a nonpartisan election. There's no D or R next to the names on the judge's race. We're on the page 2 that he was talking about a little bit ago. So that party affiliation doesn't show up for common pleas court judges. It does for Court of Appeals. It does for the Ohio Supreme Court, but it does not show up for common pleas court or municipal court. So if you could pass that word and let them know the name so they know it. We're trying to get the word out as much as we can. We have the slate cards near the sign-up sheets out here. If you can take one of those with you as well. We're going to be outside early voting, passing them out to people. My wife has organized a lot of those volunteers. So we're trying to get the word out as much as we can, and I need your help to do that as well. If you can, tell your friends, tell your family. If you want to email them, send them an email. Go to my website and take a look. It's all just Kunsman for Judge. It's Kunsman. Again, it's on the slate cards there. Turnout is the key in this election. We need to get Donald Trump elected. We need to get Bernie Moreno. And the turnout is going to, I think they're projecting about 12 points or something like that in Ohio for Trump. It's a lot tighter with Bernie. We need to have that turnout for him. And we need to get issue 1 a no on issue 1. And I would humbly ask you also, the turnout is going to be so key for this race tonight. So if you agree with what I'm talking about tonight, please tell your friends and family, ask them to check me out if they, or let them know what I told you tonight. And if they agree as well, please, I humbly ask that you would vote for me on November 5th, and that they would as well. And if you can volunteer for anything, we're doing the slate card pass out. I appreciate that as well. And my wife would appreciate it too, because she's trying to get volunteers. And speaking of, she's at another event holding down the fort for me. And so I thank you for letting me jump ahead again, because I'm gonna head over to Cornerstone for the Nightbird event that she's waiting for me on. So
Thank you.
thank you.
All right.
Don't forget, he's brought the slate cards back there, and you're welcome to take
Yeah, they're
one.
right by the sign-up sheet.
Yeah.
They got all the Republican candidates on.
Best
so
wishes.
Thank you.
Best
Thank
wishes.
you. Thank you, everyone.